An Axios story earlier this week reported that Caitlyn Jenner may run for governor of California. And we got a new development this morning. Former Trump campaign advisor Brad Parscale may be providing guidance for her bid.
So joining us to discuss Democratic strategist Andrew Feldman and co-host of the Real Line podcast, Marshall Kosloff. Marshall, let me start with you. I know you've actually met Caitlyn Jenner before. What do you make of these developments?
What's really funny about this is there's two things. One, this is basically what's going to continue happening in states where the minority party is just incredibly weak. So in California, the Republican Party is pretty much dead as a governing force at the state level. So you still have congressmen such as Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, but you're not going to have an actual strong state party. So that's a perfect chance for celebrities to jump in. The same thing is true in Texas, with a lot of Democrats sort of excited about Matthew McConaughey maybe running for governor. Because when a party is that weak, it actually could take a celebrity who's able to break through the traditional polarization that make that more difficult actually possible. You see the example of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But the second thing, and the funniest thing about Caitlyn, is when you meet Caitlyn, you'll be shocked that Caitlyn is an actual Fox News boomer conservative. There's absolutely, this isn't one of those situations where it's a sort of liberal, sort of moderate. Yeah. No, Caitlyn Jenner is very conservative. The funny story that actually came out of this is when Caitlyn Jenner was traveling the country to promote basic LGBTQ issues with Republican governors. There was a lot of surprise whenever she'd meet with state leadership because she would show up and then be this actual Fox News conservative. So there was a lot of actual things that went along. I think people were expecting something much more Kardashian-y there. Right. So yeah, it's just a lot there.
Yeah, there is a lot there. The celebrity point is an interesting one because I would see this too. Like when I lived in Kentucky, there was always talk about Ashley Judd running for something because it was the same thing. It was an uphill slog for Democrats. So what can we possibly do to kind of tilt the playing field a little bit? Let's throw a famous name in there, somebody people will recognize. Maybe that will help us out. What do you make of all of these developments, Andrew?
Oh, it just feels like another reality show, Crystal. I mean, this recall effort's going to be a real pain for Gavin Newsom, but I think that's all it's going to be. Just a lot of money and a lot of pain. But in the end, I think it'll be fine, no matter who they put up here. But look, Caitlyn Jenner, as Marshall just said, is a hardline conservative. I mean, Trump conservative, and so this is just not going to fly in California.
Well, I'm not so sure because, Marshall, she probably is more analogous to Arnold Schwarzenegger's H.W. Bush tax cut politics, but she's so famous. I mean, arguably just as famous as Schwarzenegger was at the time. Now, I'm not saying it necessarily will work, but she does have some GOP backing here. And given just the dissatisfaction generally in California right now with the establishment wing of the Democratic Party, not necessarily, like they're progressive or Republican either, but people are generally upset, at least it looks like, at Gavin Newsom. How might this work if it was going to?
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about the comparison to Schwarzenegger is that Schwarzenegger was incredibly political even before he actually made his run. So
That's right.
He gave a speech at the Republican National Convention. He was clearly known within the broad public sphere as like a center-right conservative type person. So it's not quite clear that one can literally come from nowhere and just run for office given that outsider status. Same thing's true of Trump. Trump spent 30 years saying that he may or may not run for president, publishing books, really speaking to things. And the thing that probably makes me suspect that Andrew's correct about at least the Caitlyn Jenner version of this is I'm just not quite sure that Caitlyn has a specific answer to the critiques of California, but the type of voters she'd have to bring in would be attracted to. So it's not as if she's an Andrew Yang type who has an unconventional approach to anything. It's not as if she has a unique policy issue or a unique angle or a unique experience that she would really leverage there. It's that she's obviously pretty socially liberal, especially with LGBTQ stuff, but any gubernatorial nominee in California on the Republican side is likely to have relatively those same sort of positions anyway. So it's just not quite clear what the value add is here. And, Brad Parscale, who is famously Trump's digital director, they're going to have to actually do some work. And there's a whole other conversation we could have too, but they're going to always have to do some work to actually come up with something unique that they're offering.
Yeah, who
he
was
is an expert at lighting money on fire.
relieved of his duties, I was
Yeah.
going to say, as campaign manager because so much money disappeared. Andrew, there's a few things here that I do think she has going for her. The name recognition thing alone is actually really important. And the reason why is because, remember, we were talking to Reed Wilson about there may be 1,000 people on the ballot.
Right.
And so the biggest problem up to this point of those who were leading the recall effort was coming up with one candidate that people would coalesce behind. And then the other thing, and I'm not like making the case for it, I just want to kind of play devil's advocate on this, but I think the other thing is you actually probably have a good chunk of Californians who are culturally liberal.
Yes.
And will like the idea of voting for someone who would be the first openly trans governor in the country, who probably have some, in my view, bad economic views and would be okay with some of the Fox News boomerism on that side of the ledger. What do you think of that case for Caitlyn?
I still think it's weak. I mean, I still think that Caitlyn Jenner has, just a real uphill battle. Just given she's not a center right conservative. She is a far right conservative. I know. I completely agree on LGBTQ issues that she's much more liberal, of course. But on other issues, if you look at some of the comments she's made over the years that would come up in a deep dive Oppo research investigation, I think she would have a tough time connecting with voters across that state. And I think she has goodwill among the American people right now, and I don't think she should tarnish that, and she should stay on the sidelines. I just think it's a weak case for anyone to be able to go against a Democrat statewide in that state right now, regardless of if folks are upset about what happened with coronavirus over the summer or whatever other policy you're upset about. I just think that the party is too strong there.
Yeah, it's possible. At the very least, we may get a reality show called Call Me Governor. All right,
my God.
More Team Rising right after this.